I really should tidy up the bench at some point, but, you know, if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, then what does it mean to have an empty desk? I'm often asked on the Airsoft field about how to go about filming Airsoft gameplay, and my first response is usually, don't. Seriously, it's a pain in the arse. Firstly, you do not know what's going to happen on the day, so planning a video ahead is very difficult, if not impossible. I mean, a video like this, I've got a script, I'm looking at one right now on my laptop, and I've got the bits and bobs that I want to talk about. Whereas when you're recording Airsoft gameplay, I mean, you'll have a general idea of what you want to do that day, but that's about it. And be ready for everything to go wrong at once. And whilst I tend to focus on doing things on a tight budget on this channel, filming your gameplay is one area where skimping can really bugger things up. Now, I began my Airsoft career, and I'm very fortunate enough to be able to call it that, using two of these incredibly cheap action cameras, or faux pros as I call them. The onboard microphone was atrocious, so I instead recorded the audio separately with my phone in a pocket. There was absolutely no stabilisation, and the quality makes me shudder when I compare it to what I record now. But they did a good enough job to springboard Fulcrum into what it is today. Indeed, one of my favourite pieces of gameplay, previously known as Hilltop Sniper, was shot using two of these. One as a selfie camera and one as the most important camera, the Scopecam. My original Scopecam was one of these cameras with a 70mm pinhole CCTV lens installed inside a project enclosure mounted onto my scope. It was very crude, but it worked. However, along with many other shortcomings, it was absolutely bloody enormous. And so I eventually upgraded to the Runcam 2 4K. Right now this has got the original 170-degree fisheye lens in, but I used to use it with a 35mm lens or a 70mm pinhole again, depending on what I was doing. But eventually I just stuck with the 35mm lens, as constantly taking this camera apart was just wearing it out, and that's how you get dust on the image sensor, and that's just going to cause a whole world of issues. And this Scopecam is a lot smaller than my original Scopecam, and the video quality was better by leaps and bounds. But over time, this camera setup really started to frustrate me. The Runcam 2 4K, or at least my one, has a nasty habit of randomly stopping, with no signal that it had, so no beep, no flash of a light, it would just stop. And this ruined a lot of potentially great videos, especially when I was sniping. So eventually I relegated my Runcam 2 4K to my selfie camera, which is arguably the least important camera angle. Although when this camera works properly, I argue it suits the selfie camera role very well. It's very low profile, doesn't stick out that much, and is very lightweight. But of course this left me Scopecamless. And to replace it, I originally wanted to get something like a Foxeer or a GitUp. However, at least at the time when I was looking for them, I just couldn't find them anywhere, and it seems like they've been discontinued. So I was left with only one real option: another Runcam. The Runcam Scopecam series came about due to a popularity of Airsoft Scopecams, especially given that Runcams were often modified to make them. Now this is a Scopecam Lite, it's what the old man uses, and so I decided to get myself one of these, the Runcam Scopecam 2 4K. Out of the box, this camera is incredibly well built. The externals are almost completely metal, including the rail mount as well, and so it's a little heavier than the other Scopecams, however it is incredibly robust. All the better for surviving bashes against trees and buildings. And indeed this camera is a lot more waterproof than the previous models. I can't remember what the IP number is, I don't think you can completely submerge this thing, but if it's pissing down with rain, this thing should be fine. And indeed I've used it on several soaking wet days, and I've had no problems with it. To mount the camera to your gun, all you have to do is flip out this little bit here and undo it by hand. You can use a flat head if you need to. And this allows you to open up the rail mount, so you can then click it onto your piece of rail, and then you can tighten it back up. Nice and easy. And I love how it mounts on. This is a nice and solid mounting point, all the better for changing between guns nice and quickly. Although sometimes I like to stick a little shim on the rail system just so that it's a bit tighter, because sometimes I get a slight bit of play. And you don't want your Scopecam to move. It should be solidly anchored to your airsoft gun, otherwise it will just annoy you when you're editing. To turn the camera on, you slide this switch forward, and we're now recording, and it will give you a little burst of vibration to tell you that it is now recording. The light on the top and on the back are flashing slowly, and then to stop recording, just turn it off again. And it will vibrate once to tell you that you've ceased recording. No shutter button, low hassle, almost foolproof as long as you remember to turn it on. The Runcam Scopecam 2 4K can record in several different resolutions and frame rates, including up to 120 FPS on 1080p. It can also apparently do 4K at 30 FPS, but when I tried it, the frame rate was appalling and the quality questionable, and I don't even think it's true 4K, but it doesn't really matter because my go-to setting is 2.7K at 60 FPS. And with that, the slow motion isn't as smooth as if I was using it at 1080p, but there's twice as many pixels if I've done the maths right, so you can zoom in on the edit without losing too much quality. And to connect it to the app, you have it turned on, and then you press this button down here, and it should vibrate again. And then it will change colour like so. It flashes whatever colour that is. And then you just follow the instructions on the app and you can connect it to your phone. The Runcam app seems to be very reliable. I've used it on Huawei's and Samsung's and they seem to connect perfectly fine. I've had no issues with it. And the video quality of this thing is exceptional. Far better than anything I've used before. Granted, I don't have the best eyes, so I had to get help to set this up to make sure that it was tuned up right. And the old man also suggested using a lens hood to get rid of a slight haze it had whenever the sun was out. Otherwise, the footage is very clear and the rounds are easily visible in flight. Although my Bolt aka 74U isn't the most stable platform for it, so there's the obvious effects of the recoil. And you can also use this for still photographs apparently, but I haven't used that feature as it's not what I need. The internal battery on this thing is recharged via a USB-C port on the top here, and the internal battery of this camera is very long-lived. I tend to charge this up during the lunch break, and I have forgotten to do that once before, and I only got the low battery warning in the last 10 minutes of the last game of the day. And because the internal battery is so long lasting, this removes the need for an external battery. And the SD card sits in this little slot here, and I use a SanDisk Extreme Pro 128GB card. That is the largest card size that this thing will accept. And I've had no issues with this recording all day long, even across the full day event I've just played. The camera did crash the first time I used it, and at the time I was quite ticked off with it. And it wouldn't respond to anything. It was turning it off and on, pressing all the buttons, taking the SD card out. Lights were on, but nobody was home. And to reset it, apparently all you have to do is hold the Wi-Fi button for about 8 seconds. And thankfully, I haven't had to do that since, but it is good practice to check your camera regularly when in use. Now, the audio was very respectable, to the point that I could rely on it as a backup. That was until the microphone packed up. But I suspect I busted the mic here when I stuck a little needle in it to try and clean some crap out of the ports. So I do need to fix that at some point, but frankly the audio from this isn't too important apart from it helps me sync up the footage. Which is a little bit tricky when one track hasn't got any audio, but it still can be done, it just takes a little longer to do so. Overall, the Runcam Scopecam 2 has without a doubt revolutionised how I record my airsoft gameplay. And whilst it costs as much as a good airsoft gun, it has been worth every penny. From the build quality that would make a Finnish mobile phone company envious, to the battery life that frees my airsoft guns from the oppression of USB cables and power banks. And even the little foibles I've encountered have been completely offset by the sheer convenience and incredible footage I've got using this thing. If you found this video helpful or useful, then please make sure you leave a like. And if you want to support what I do, then make sure you check out fulcrumairsoft.com and Fulcrum Airsoft on Cults 3D. And if you want to be part of the channel, then please make sure you subscribe too. And once you've done that, you can check out this little montage of my double eagle UMP 45, filmed with this exact scope cam.